Get started. They're talking.
Yes.
I was waiting for 7:30.
Oh, okay, okay. I will.
Forward it.
Yeah.
Confirm next week.
We always start at 7 o'clock.
We can start.
Thank
Thank you for bringing me out.
7 o'clock, right here on the agenda, 7 o'clock. I guess we just
So
skip
we'll
it.
have to switch.
Okay, so I'd like to call the meeting to order. Would somebody like to lead us in the pledge?
Where's the flag?
We did have a flag, where'd it go?
We had one. We will
We did.
move right on to the first order of business. We have some distinguished guests here tonight, and I'll let Christine introduce them.
Thank you, Chuck. We have three extraordinary men here tonight. Jay Street is the councilman. From which district? I don't know the number. 10. But even more important in his role as a county councilman has been his lifelong service to the community. He's the only person whose contributors I've ever looked up, and they were non-existent because he gets elected without spending money. If that is an achievement,
I'm telling you, that's something.
He has been director of the Hilltop Center for a long time and very active in all kinds of educational matters, plaintiff in the school case that I will let him describe to you. He has been part of the Wilmington Education Advisory Commission, is that the Commissioner Committee? And along with his experience, Tony Allen has also chaired the endeavor. Mr. Allen brought this book with him. There are copies back here that you can have. And I suggest it's really good reading. I know this is an unusual program for the Civic League, but what happens with the school system is going to make a huge difference in this community over the next 25 years.
Absolutely.
It will affect every aspect of our lives, from the taxes we pay, to the roads that we drive on, to where buildings are built. It's a monumental shift if this plan is adopted. So I thought we needed to know more about it. We needed to know whether we could support it, because it's extremely important, and I think sometimes we need to push the legislature to think very broadly. Anyway, we are also honored to have with us Dr. Doherty, who is the superintendent of the Red Clay School District, which has agreed to try and deal with the situation in Wilmington and incorporate many of the Wilmington schools into the Red Clay District, which I think probably takes an awful lot of courage under the circumstances. Now, the first question I would like for you gentlemen to answer, and whatever order you like to, I'd like for you to explain to people why this is needed. I, for one, believe it is needed very badly, but I would like for them to tell you why. Who would like to go first?
I'm happy to start. First of all, it's a pleasure to be here. We've been doing these kind of meetings for about 2 years now, but I know Jay and others have been working on these their entire life, and I take the responsibility very seriously. So always an honor to be with him in these moments. When we first started, which was the fall of 2014, we remember that Governor Markell stood on the steps of Warner Elementary and announced his plan for 6 priority schools, 3 in Christine and 3 in Red Clay. And I've said this to him, so I'm not saying anything I haven't said to him. I thought he did it in a fairly inartful way. It was not clear what he was proposing at the time, and when the material facts came out, it created a big firestorm. And at the time, there were several representatives, Jim Potter, Bolden, Johnson, Senator Margaret Rose Henry, kind of took the governor, in my view, to the woodshed a little bit and said, instead of specifically focusing on those 6 schools, why don't you think about Wilmington education more broadly, which, as you probably know, has been a long time coming, has had many twists and turns over that history, and meant more than simply one new initiative. So he asked me a couple of days later to chair the Wilmington Education Advisory Committee. And at the time, I thought it would be an opportunity for us to take a look at what had happened over the last 15 years of my time here, which had been literally 4 or 5 reports, not all that dissimilar from this book. So many recommendations, really thoughtful analysis, but no action, no political will in that time. So we pulled together a group of what I call not the usual suspects. There were lots of parents, retired teachers, administrators, et cetera, in that first committee. And we developed a plan and called it the action agenda. And the fundamental premise in our view is twofold. One is there are 11,500 City of Wilmington children. That's over 130,000 kids in public schools, 11,500. Those 11,500 are governed by 4 traditional school districts, 1 VOTEC district, and somewhere around 13 charters in and around the City of Wilmington, none of which have a unified plan for how they educate them. So we think the fragmentation is debilitating for those kids, and a material fact is when you look at the analysis of how those kids perform in any district, any charter, they are always underperforming their low-income counterparts across the county, and certainly kids writ large across the county. So it was our view that we take a long view at this and say, let's try to reduce the fragmentation, at least take the initial step in reducing the fragmentation. The other piece, which is I think at the heart of our matter, so this doesn't get reported as much as I would like, is how you actually support kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. So Delaware is one of 15 states in the country that has no funding for low-income students. I'll repeat that. One of 15 states that has no funding for low-income students outside of their federal Title I requirement.
Do you mean extra funding over and above what state provides for all students?
The other states that do it make a special allocation for kids from low-income backgrounds. So Delaware is an outlier in that regard. And just to give you a sense, one of those 15 is Mississippi, which has always performed pretty badly with respect to children. Delaware is one of 5 states that has no funding for English language learners, even though English language learners are the fastest growing population of students in our state. And finally, there's a gap in special education funding in kindergarten through the 3rd grade. So we believe 2 things. You got to reduce fragmentation and give the majority of the city students to one district and try to hold them accountable best as we can. And you got to make sure that district is supported. And that support is where that funding comes in. And by the way, in case anybody wonders if this is just a Wilmington problem, you should know that 50% of all public school students across the state are low income, 50%.
Yes.
And most of the childhood poverty, incidents of childhood poverty, are the highest incidents are in Sussex County, not Newcastle County. So this is in fact a statewide problem. So we are attempting to do those 2 things, reduce the fragmentation and provide the funding in what we think is a meaningful way. And I know Jay will tell you the history of inequity that really starts with Brown versus Board, of which Delaware was centrally a part, but it has not acted in any meaningful way in the last 60 years. So I'll leave it there and have Jay work.
Jay, would you share with us what you have seen over the years in your role in helping provide social services to the families in Wilmington? Could you tell us how all these changes in the school has impacted the children?
Well, I entered the arena in 1974, and my role at the time was to work with Wilmington parents and students to move into a school desegregation order and have it implemented peacefully. And we worked real hard at that. The fact of the matter is, I was forced to work toward implementation of a school desegregation order that I didn't like and I didn't agree with. But as a state, as a county, we agreed that what happened in Boston with kids shouldn't happen here, and it did. In my opinion, up until a month ago, we did a great job in keeping violence out of our schools. Unfortunately, that's all we did. And I entered the arena when it was a Wilmington school district, and as I'm on it, I will not be able to leave it better than I found it, because it's gotten progressively worse over the 41 years that I've been involved. And here's the harsh reality. We went from a super district, one district, state intervened and said we want 4 districts. At the time, the 4 districts, there were 4 areas, they made those 4 districts. We objected to that. As a matter of fact, that's when the Coalition to Save Our Children was formed, on the basis of what Dr. Allen calls fragmentation, but on the basis of why would you divide the city into 5 districts? And as we speak now, they won't even keep the same calendar. So different districts start on different days. If there's a decision as to whether or not to close for snow or when service day is going to be, there's no continuity there. Second, the curriculum may be different if you cross the street. So on one side of the street you're in Christine, on the other side of the street you're in Red Clay. So in my opinion, based with good foundation, things have gotten progressively worse. Now, we went into a school desegregation order, and when we had 4 districts from 1981 to currently, and in 1993, the state, under the leadership of then Governor Carper, said it's time to lift the school corridor. And they went running into court and they said, Your Honor, we are among the most desegregated school systems in the country. And we don't need you to supervise us anymore. We swear we will do right by man, God, and country. Court let them go. 1996, they passed, before the court order was lifted, they passed the Charter School Act. 1998, they passed the Choice School Act. And in 2000, they passed the Neighborhood School Act. In my opinion, those 3 acts together are more egregious and have been more harmful than the Educational Management Act of 1968, which put them under court order in the first place. And the proof is in the numbers. They're not my test scores, they're not my reports, they're the states, and we can finally speak for themselves. So, in 2000, and the General Assembly had the unmitigated goal to pass the Neighborhood School Act on April 4th, 2000, April 4th being the anniversary of Dr. King's assassination. They sent a crystal clear message. I objected to no avail. But they did pass a resolution saying, and they formed the Neighborhood School Committee. The Neighborhood School Committee met over a 6-month period of time and recommended essentially the following: a reduction in the number of districts in the city of Wilmington and a weighted funding formula for high poverty schools. Nothing happened. No legislation was even sponsored. 2008, the General Assembly convened yet another task force which essentially said there needs to be a reduction in the number of districts and a weighted funding formula for high poverty schools. No legislation was ever sponsored. Now we are where we are. And this is my dress rehearsal for what I'm going to say tomorrow. And I'm going to tell you exactly how I view it, how I look at it. What I have said to my colleagues in West, what I've said to other black elected officials, the General Assembly, historically and traditionally, has never done anything progressive and helpful to low-income children, especially those in the city of Wilmington. And the state, in 1954, knowing that this was a home of brain, closed Milford High School rather than let 10 kids go and attend that school. The school was closed. But what I'm saying to my colleagues, I don't think the perspective and the attitude of the General Assembly is any different. And the day happens to be the 62nd anniversary of Brown versus Ford. I don't think it's any different 62 years later. Elected officials are telling me you're wrong, it's gonna be there, but I don't think it's gonna pass the General Assembly. I think that it's going to require that a judge or judges compel him to do what we've been saying for the past 16 years. What I'm gonna tell the General Assembly, I don't want folks to say I'm threatening, I'm promising. Okay, don't pass it. But don't start screaming and hollering foul and I go running straight to the courthouse and say, Your Honor, we waited for 15 years. And the remedy order is what they've agreed to, not once, not twice, but the third time. It's just a matter of fundamental fairness. Now, the state can't have it both ways. They passed the Neighborhood School Act, and right now, the Neighborhood School Act is a law in Delaware where you can't, everybody was happy when county kids no longer had to go to school in the city of Wilmington. That was the primary objective of all three of those acts, to accomplish that. But you can't say that the Neighborhood School Act is the law and then require kids in the city of Wilmington to attend school in the Newark area in a non-contiguous area of the county. It's not rocket science work, and in the matter of City versus Christina, 2007-2008, the Chancery Court upheld our position that closing schools in the city of Wilmington was a violation of the Neighborhood School Act. And so, I'm not a fortune teller, but there's preference, there's precedent in litigation in other jurisdictions where the court has compelled states to provide additional funding for high poverty, actually segregated schools. So, it's worse than I started in 1974, and this is just a matter of fundamental fairness, and in my opinion, it's compromised legislation. Because in my opinion, those three acts are unconstitutional. They cause desegregation, have a segregated effect. I think it's intentional, and they don't have Scalia no more.
Mm-hmm.
So if we go running up in the courthouse, right now it's 4-4, and I guess the presidential election will decide which way to turn out on the 5th vote. So I'm hoping for the best and preparing for the worst. And as I told the state board and I told the school district, I don't threaten to bring litigation. I just bring it.
I've tried reading this on my smartphone in the last 2 weeks. It's not easy to do, but I think I remember the statistic that shows so vividly what he's talking about. I believe the minority population in the Wilmington schools now has reached something like, was it 94%? Is that right?
It's well over 90%.
Yeah.
Can I ask for a clarification? When you're talking about Wilmington schools, are you, when I think of it now, in the current days, I think of, like, I live across from Christina High School. That, to me, is a segregated school. So much of it is African American. And when I attend school district meetings, nobody does with the, deals with the issues. So, I mean, do you consider that a segregated school in Wilmington School? They have so many children from Wilmington coming out there.
Well, I don't consider it to be a segregated school. I'm considered to be a city school. I do consider it to be a resegregated school. And what's the genesis of that? The decline in enrollment in the Christina School District over the last 7 years has been more than 5,000. Where did those kids go? They went to the charter schools or a choice elsewhere. So when I take the position that the Charter School Act and Choice School Act has had a segregated effect, I say that with obvious foundation. And if you look at the charter schools, they're either predominantly black or predominantly white. And it's not rocket science in terms of the stellar charter schools that are exemplary are predominantly white.
The only thing I'd add on Christina, just as a point of fact, there are 14,000 school districts in the country, 14,000. 4 are discontinuous. which means they start in one place, are divided by some land mass, in our case, 60 to 80 miles of highway, and then pick up again in 4. So this notion that the current configuration is anywhere near normal is
Oh, it's not.
is quite ludicrous. It's really quite ludicrous, and it speaks to a lot of problems we have.
Dr. Doherty, as head of the Red Clay School District, would take on the challenge of adding the Wilmington schools that Christina loses to his district. I read some about his background, and it sounds to me like he is uniquely prepared to deal with special needs children and those that come from poverty and violence. Would you care to address your plans in this situation?
But before he does that, let me be my interruptive self, because in 2008, Delaware Black Caucus went to the governor, went to all school districts and said, there needs to be a reduction in the number of districts in the city.
Yes.
Which one of you would be willing to take all of the children in the city of Wilmington? It was like Christmas. Silent night. Everybody turned around and corresponded and said no. Subsequently, Dr. Doherty said he would be more than willing to take on the challenge. So I want to thank him for that, and I'm sorry for being my usual disruptive self.
Go ahead.
I'm like your young son. Well, thanks for attending that. With Tony and Jay, it's always an honor. We've become very good friends. Just people keep saying, what makes Red Clay qualified to do this? First of all, when they announced the priority schools, they weren't the 3 lowest schools in the city. They were just schools that, by someone else's plan, thought it was a good idea. If you go to those 3 schools a day, you would not know they were a priority school. Staff did a great job. We're the largest district in the state. We're 18,200 students. We're actually number 1 in the state in all college readiness, SAT, PSAT. Our dropout rate is 1.7%, lowest in Newcastle County of the districts that involve the city. I look at children wanting a better education. I believe we do a great job in our district, that we care about kids. I think the first battle is you have to show children that you love them, and that you care about them. We do a lot of needs and outside the box thinking. I was looking at our growth data the other day from some of our schools. We have 32 right now, and it's very impressive what we're doing. We don't have all the answers, but we just said, we know that it's just not teaching that helps young men and women. The number 1 statistic in dropout is that teenagers will tell you, I'm not going to school because nobody cares if I'm there. We have a society that basically decided to throw people away. And I'm very proud of the people in our district. I think we have a unique plan. We're not going to be busting people all over the place. We're going to try to create some outside the box thinking like we have with Conrad Schools of Science, Callaway. We just changed another one of our high schools in the 612 for an IB program. We now have a full CT program, and we're a large district. We have 7 high schools, 8 middle schools, and we're getting ready to open up a college academy in the city at George campus. So I think we have the ability to think outside the box. Traditional education is no longer a valid issue. Teaching is teaching. But you have to be creative to think, what does our society need? What does the job market ask for? I've been meeting for the past year with business community. What do you want from our students? What are you looking for our students? And what do you need from them? And not everybody's going to college. And we better have people who are plumbers and electricians and auto mechanics and masons and can do mason work. We better have those. And so when people ask me about it, I think it's a wonderful opportunity for young men and women. I think our district's up to the challenge. We take over 7 buildings, and we have a plan to replicate. And I tell if someone's doing something really good in our district, we're going to take it and use it. Because we don't have to reinvent it, we have to be creative about it. making sure it runs smoothly. I'm familiar with the schools, I've been in the schools, that we would probably, we would take over. I think we have a good reputation, and I think people trust us, and, you know, the biggest thing I had was, are we gonna do all this busing? And I said, right now, we don't do all this busing. I mean, if you live in the city of Wilmington, you wanna go to one of our high schools, the max ride is 32 minutes on a bus. You go to one of our middle schools, and we bus to all of our middle schools, it's 33 minutes. That's the max time on a bus. There are actually kids who live in the neighborhood school act, in one sense, may travel a little further. I think it's time for the General Assembly to say we're gonna fund the money, and the money's there. I don't wanna hear that the money's not there. The money's there, and I believe we educate now to create a better Delaware. And if we decide that this is opportunity, we'll waste another decade. I'm tired of really wasting time on kids, and I know my staff is, and we know it's gonna be a lot of work, but I think we have the support. I think we have support of the city council, from the county council. We have support from community groups in the city. We have 67 partners in our school district with community members and with businesses. People want to get on board. They just want to see you have a plan. And just so you know, why I think what we're doing right now is ineffective. I'll have students move 2 or 3 times and they'll change school districts because they're moving over, or the busing issues. And we don't need that. And I think the opportunity, we'll probably pick up 3,000. We think we're going to get more students back because more people are going to come. We turn away about 2,000 students right now a year for choice, right now.
Outside of the district.
Huh?
Outside.
Outside of our district. Yeah, please edit that, not in our district. But no, we just don't have the space, and it's actually going to give us some more room if we create really strong magnet opportunities for students, you know, when you think about opportunities in additional high schools, additional performing arts centers, additional IB centers, immersion programs. And we're one of few.
Excuse me, their card should have been circulated. If you think of a question, write it on the card and pass it out, or we'll give it to you.
How about I use the ask?
Or just ask.
The back's out of control already. And they're regulate people, so I don't think.
All right, one of the questions I wanted to ask you about financing. Years ago, when I was working for the General Assembly, I remember all the legislation was involved in making red clay give some of its wealth to the other schools.
That is a great point. I want to thank you for bringing it up. It's called equalization, and right now, red clay gives a lot of money to other school districts. We are not a fan of equalization. The problem is, the General Assembly, we have a 35-year-old calculation. It's not.
So does Brandywine.
There's only 4 districts that support the state. And we think that we should be allowed to keep our money. And with the tax code and with the equalization, we give about $3 million to other people. Since I've been superintendent, that's over $21 million. And so the opportunity to fix the equalization code would be a benefit. But I think, you know, everybody wants to try to change how we fund education, and the way the unit system works is not broken. It needs to be tweaked and adjusted to modern day times. Example, we don't fund for students with disabilities in the basic category from kindergarten to 3rd grade. And if you work with students at an earlier age, you have a better chance for these students to get adjusted, to work with some of the disabilities, and actually get them out of the disability category with students who have, for example, could have, you know, autism is one thing where you see that there's great research out there, and the earlier you get it, and you start rectifying situations and working with men and women, the greater chance they have of getting out. And I know several students who have worked their way out of that area and no longer are considered to be autistic, and in the sense of the need assistance. So, you know, when we don't fund ELL students, which our population right now, we are 22% African American, 24% Hispanic, 46%, 47% Caucasian, and about 7% Asian. Well, when I started, we were 50% Hispanic. We're 11% ELL. I mean, at ELL, we have 47 languages in our district, from students from Southeast Asia, from Europe, from Central America. It's just not students who are Hispanic that need language proficiency.
So would you say that the challenges for Red Clay are such that Red Clay deserves to have that money?
Oh, I'll always say Red Clay deserves it. I'll say that, I'll stand up, but we can get a vote right now. But, you know, the opportunity is, we believe, money's not everything, but when you have to have assistance for young men and women, you want lower class size, and what you want to be able to do is offer assistance. So, you know, we believe, you know, during the day, extended day time, after school time, Saturday time, the more we can have young men and women throughout our district. I'm a big after school guy. I believe, you know, we serve dinner right now in about 7 buildings. We serve 8,000 breakfasts a day. We call it grab and go. We serve 14,000 lunches. We have students, and we believe that this is where our young men and women are getting fed. I'm not counting on them going home, because it doesn't matter where you live. I've got young men and women that live out in Greenville or live in Hocassin, that there's nobody home when they go home.
Right.
So my point is, I'd rather feed you. We did a vision program, 600 classes this year, vision to learn. We do hearing, we do dental. And someone says, well, you're taking over the role of society. Yeah, because we are now society. And if the American education system does not get better in what we do, then we'll be like the Sears Catalog Company 50 years ago. There's no such thing as Sears Catalog anymore, because they didn't adapt and adjust. And I think this is an opportunity for Delaware to step up, do the right thing, and then 10 years from now, look back and say, look at the things that we could do for young men and women, and how successful they are. This is not going to fail, because we're doing what's best for young men and women. And when you do, and when people see that you care about them, and you're trying to get them to the finish line, they have a different attitude about that.
Okay.
But just a couple points. One, we're operating a school system now that was developed on the basis of things that happened 40 years ago. The only reason the former Newark School District was included in the school desegregation order was to avoid white flight under a school desegregation order. If you look at the growth in the county and the growth along in the 13 and 40 corridors, it's diverse. So that's no longer relevant. Second, Colonial is the primary recipient of the money from funding equalization, and Colonial having the lowest tax base, but it's also the primary growth area. And what actually happened was, when we went from the super district to 4 district, the superintendent of Brandywine at the time said, it's not fair for me to have Riverside and the Northeast. It's just not fair. It's too much of a burden. And then the superintendent of Colonial at the time said, I'll take them, y'all pay me. And I mean, that's essentially how the conversation went. And so funding equalization was a result of that conversation. And then Colonial got Christiana Mall and the port added on, so that they would have more revenue, but essentially the other 3 districts have to give Colonial more than $1 million a year.
So there's a big challenge to straighten out the financing system.
And I'm looking at this in terms of long-term stability, and nobody's under any illusions here. Nobody's going to sit here and say 10 years from now, all the kids in the city are going to be Rhodes Scholars and everything's going to do well. No. But it's just a matter of not leveling the playing field, giving them a field to play on, giving them an opportunity. By the same token, I have 200 kids a day that come look out with the Navy Center. And I can tell you in no uncertain terms, they're properly motivated, properly directed. They can and they do succeed. We send kids to college every year. And I'm at the point now in my career where I get invitations to go to college commencements, and I can sit in the stand and say, they haven't got a master's degree, and watch them remember when they were in daycare. But in a partnership with Red Clay, than before in that school program. So I know it can work, it does work. It's not gonna be perfect, but if you look at long-term stability, you would rather have the lowest income children accessible to the highest tax base. And right now, the highest tax base is being Brandywine and Red Clay.
Dr. Allen,
Can we have some questions from the audience,
Yes.
Christine?
oh, I'm sorry.
Bill's been waiting, I've been waiting, the lady in front of me.
Bill,
I grew up in the Stanton School District, which is part of the Red Clay School District. It was Stanton, it was Marshallton McCain, it was AI, they were all separate school districts, and they get their slice of the city. And then later on, I ended up on the Red Clay School Board from 97 to 99. So the first year I was on the board, they just modified what was a science academy to a charter school that was based on math and science. And then, and they had implemented choice within Red Clay School District previous to the law being approved in Dover. And the next year it was approved, and that's where there were, in the early years, we provided buses for any child in the school district from wherever they lived to whatever school they wanted to go within the school district. And it was my interpretation in retrospect, looking at what was going on, it was allowing a lot of the suburban people opportunities to get anywhere else other than the city, and they ran every school they could get to. More specifically, my kids were in the one suburban school that was a K-5 program under desegregation, and the populace went from 625 to 832. It peaked out at. They had kids sitting on top of kids at Forest Oak Elementary, and it was the white flight out of the city that was doing it. And then 2 years later, they turned around, other members of the board, and said, oh, this is too expensive, we can't afford to pay for all these bus routes. As a bus stop is vacated by a child, that bus stop's going away. And as long as there's one kid standing there that wants to go to the school that's been stopping there, they'll continue that route, and eventually most of that diminishes. The point being in this whole discussion, based on what I had looked at, data dating back to the 80s, while I was on the school board and into the early 2000s after I had gotten off the school board, was that some of the city programs did have a positive effect on the lower socioeconomic strata from the city because of the suburban populace coming in and a well-designed program. The one that I referred to is the Warner 3 to 5 program that existed dating back to the early 80s. If you looked at the 60% suburban kids that came in, they came from a middle income strata, but those communities were accepting of the fact of where their kids were going in the city and kind of wrapped their arms around the program and had a positive performance on the kids that were coming from lower socioeconomic stratas going into that specific program. But in other city programs, it was less beneficial.
What's the
Is
question?
there a question, Bill?
Yes, I'm trying to get to a point.
All right.
I'd have gone first if I'd known it would be taking us
Yeah.
long. Mine was a short one.
There's two issues. One, there were aspects of the desegregation order that did have a positive effect on children. Two, since I got off the school board, that was the other thing. Right after I got on the school board, we started approving class size commitments. And the Board of Education would have to approve waivers that were granted under the law, meaning keeping class sizes K-3 down to state limits. And if they exceeded those limits, They had to vote on it in public as to which classrooms they were gonna allow to exceed those limits. At the time, Red Clay had 3 less elementary schools, which equates to 60-plus classrooms. Yet, last time I checked, and Merv can update me on what I've missed in the past couple of years, they were continuing to write waivers for class size well beyond having additional classrooms available.
We actually met class size waiver last year, though.
For the first time in 16 years since you've
Well,
approved.
Bill, you're misleading the people here, because class size waiver could be 1 child out of 400 classrooms. 1 child over in 1
You
classroom.
write a waiver for each classroom that you're gonna exceed.
That's wrong, Bill, that's absolutely wrong. The class size waiver law says, if you have 1 child in 1 class over the 22, the entire district does not meet class size waiver. Bill, that's what, I know.
It's the law.
That's not how we evaluated at the time I was
Bill,
on
the
the board.
law
16
reads,
years
the law
We had-
reads, the law reads, because 2 years ago, we missed it by 3 classrooms.
Right.
It's the entire district, it's no longer a school or a class. And so if you have 22 students, an example is, let me give you the example, October 31st, you have to decide where you are,
Right.
okay? But you get your funding at the end of September. We picked up 130 kids between October 1st and October 31st. We don't get money for that. And so the law reads, when you get to the 31st, where you are on that day, not where you are on the 30th, and not where you are on November 1st, where you are on October 31st, you decide if that's class size waiver. On November 5th, if you're over, because 2 years ago, when we gave the board presentation, we had met class size waiver on November 5th, but because of October 31st, we had to submit that we had a class size waiver. So the law says, I mean, we have 635 classrooms, and if you have 1 over, that's what the law says.
And obviously, things have changed.
Bill, I'm not following you, could you?
My point being that I think one of the things that, at different points in time with different school districts, I've always come from the perspective that if you get the class sizes down as low as possible in the K-3 years with a lower socioeconomic strata, the more you're going to have a positive impact on the overall performance throughout that child's educational cycle. So, class size and how to deal with that has as much to do with anything as far as I'm concerned. The other thing that comes to mind, and Tony was aware that there was a meeting that they had in at county councils a while back. Why is it, one of the things, like Merv alluded to earlier, actually spoke about earlier, Brandywine School District and Red Clay School District both send money to Christina and Colonial on an annual basis based on property tax value and all those things. Brandywine's performance on the years that I've looked at, as far as how the lower socioeconomic child performs in the public education system, are equal and at times better than the performance within Red Clay, both exceeding what was occurring in Colonial and Christina. Why is it they're not looking?
But that's not rocket science work. Even in the
But
city,
Bill, let's-
even in the city, there's a differentiation on income, and Brandywine happens to carry the highest income area of the city of Wilmington, and Red Clay being second. So there's a direct correlation between performance in schools and low income. And when you've got a high instance of low-income children and extreme low income in Christina, and in the case of Colonial, which has no schools in the city, therein lies your problem. And we have proof that providing a wage funding formula, which gives principals the ability to take that money and have after-school programs, Saturday schools, year-round schools, whatever that principal may think is appropriate for his or her school at the time, has a success rate and it works.
The question I was getting to was simply, why not implement the Brandywine and Red Clay division of the city?
Oh, the river.
Should've
The
just asked
river
that
plan.
question, though.
Okay, because the fact of the matter is, there's no political will to uproot the status quo, and all this is negotiated. If you wanted to do this right, you'd abolish all four of the districts.
Yes.
And at best make two, and you take the city of Wilmington as a whole, which was recommended by the neighborhood school committee in 2000, you take the city of Wilmington as a whole, the existing Red Clay and the existing Brandywine school district, and make one school district. So you have a northern school district in the county and the southern school district.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
But there's no political goodwill to do that, and we have to play the hand that we're dealt and work within the legislature. And if you look at this plan, Colonial is basically exempt because they want to maintain that funding equalization. And Brandywine says we're not taking any more kids, and they're exempt. But we take the position that 2 is better than 4, 3 is better than 4, and the most important aspect of this is the way you fund the public school.
Bill, I just want to add, just a point of fact on Colonial. Colonial has 400 students in its catchment area. 200 of them choice out already. So they are left with 200 students. And the closest school is about 6 miles and a quarter way away. When we first made our recommendation, this is one of two reports we published. When we first made our recommendation, we said, Randy, why don't you take their 200 kids? To Jay's point, we'll look for the board to do that for 200 kids.
Mark has had his hand up for a while.
Jay, first, I think what you're on for your track of the district consolidation is absolutely right, but I'd go one further. One for each county and one for the VOTEC statewide. And I would put Merv's name in, Dr. Doherty's in, to run the Newcastle County one, because I've seen what he's done in the Red Clay School District, and we've not always seen eye to eye on some of the things, as he well knows, but we've had a discussion in a civil way, and he's got a good way to look at things. And one of the things I always look at is just because you can't get the emotions in it. You're just gonna spend days and years, and next thing you know, you're back to 1955 talking about what happened, a long time ago. I always look at the infrastructure. Dr. Doherty's district, the Red Clay district, has built a lot of middle schools. To Bill's point, if you get the kids in smaller classrooms to start with, it helps. My question to Dr. Doherty would be, if this goes forward, are you going to look at all of the existing infrastructure, the schools that are in Wilmington, and the ones I'm guessing you're going to pick up a couple from Colonial as well? Are you going to look at them like you did with Red Clay and see what can be done? Because I know there's a lot of older buildings that, to be frank, the upkeep hasn't been done, and it's rather expensive. We know the capital side is the most expensive part of the education we have in Delaware. What would you do, and do you have any ideas of, like, at first consolidating a couple schools while you take one and completely revamp it? Or, would you push out into some of the outlying schools if you had to, because of whatever you may find it?
Really good question, because I think I've been talking about this about, my first ride was about 4 years ago. The capital piece of this is very important, because we don't know what we're gonna see once we go in and roofs, windows, whatever you need. The opportunity is to reconfigure the schools to which makes sense to benefit the children. And so when you're thinking about how to look at a K-8 building or a 6 to 12, because we think we could replicate some of the programs we have that are successful. The opportunity is that we do have enough buildings where if we had to start taking one at a time and gut it or do whatever we have to do. We think it's not as bad as a lot of people assume it is. We think that, what we've experienced at our class, we're finishing up our major cap this year, that over two summers, 14 months, we've been able to do a lot of work in schools, from roofs to windows to wiring, second shifts and everything have been very helpful. So we think if we get the opportunity, not only in this till 18, but also through probably the first 2 years of it, we would be able to retrofit the buildings. And the first year is really gonna take a lot of planning, and we gotta get the architects in and the engineers to tell us what needs to be fixed. Some of the buildings in Christian have replaced windows, they haven't done as much as they would like to have done. But we don't think it's also an issue of our taxpayers to fix those. And that's why in the request for funding, we asked for the capital funding as well to look at this. But we think we have a pretty strong plan of what we want to do with the buildings. We think there are enough buildings. I mean, there's 7. We don't think we need all 7 buildings. So how do you move them around? And you want to start we want to start 18-19 with a bang. And that's why this planning process is extremely important. And if you've been in our schools, I'm a stickler on how they look. You walk in, I believe the first 30 seconds, you're gonna stop and bring your child to go there. And I think we want to press it hard as we take over these buildings. Some of them, I think I've been in them, are in really good shape. Some need some loving care. And I think with our crew, they've already been thinking about how to do that. And I'm confident that what we've been able to do with all 32 in 3 years, we could do with 7 pretty quickly.
Are you using
Dr.
short?
Allen, I'm wondering, now, we have a person who's worked in educational field professionally and one who's worked at saving children as a life's goal, I think. How did you get into this, and is there something in your background that drew you to this particular problem?
I feel like I get the opportunity to speak about this a lot. And the opposition always tells me, the ones who are courageous enough, tell me those kids can't learn.
Oh, yeah.
I was one of those kids, so,
Yeah.
I mean, my background doesn't suggest that I would have the opportunity that I've had. But my parents, and I say this about all parents make the best educational choice for their child that they can afford. They do. I don't care where they come from, they do that. Which is why those charter schools that popped up in Wilmington that didn't survive, but their parents were really concerned that they were closing, was much less about their educational experience and much more about the fact that they actually thought that at least in that school, those folks cared about those kids. Right or wrong, right? So, one, it's a personal passion in that regard. Two, I helped start the Urban League 15 years ago, really around the Neighborhood Schools Act. So I watched Jay and Ray Avery and some others in action. They let me be a fly on the wall in that area and let me play a little bit. And then finally, I work for Bank of America. I've been there for now 12 years. We have 7,000 folks in Delaware, about 1,500 in the city of Wilmington. There is not 1 year where we don't spend time going to our headquarters and convincing them that Wilmington in particular, Delaware more broadly, is a place to be. And the concerns we get back are twofold: crime and violence, and education. So this notion that you can just sort of push, try to kick the can down the road is a little bit more substantive than what we might opine on generally, right? We're talking about the loss of significant institutions, business institutions in this community, which you've already seen. You've already seen that. So it is time for the state, I believe, to wake up to that reality a little bit more quickly than Delaware is used to. Or those things will continue. People will decide to move their folks. I mean, many of the Bank of America employees that we have, they live where? Pennsylvania. Why do they do that? Because the education system, they pay more taxes, but the education system there is strong. So this notion that we need, and I credit Clay and Murder for taking on this task, because the notion that it's got to get better for the sake of the state is a little bit more than just for those kids or just for the city. It really has a lot to do with the economic impact that I think Delaware is facing in a very real way.
I was really shocked several months ago to read an article about the East Side Charter School that described in vivid detail how difficult it is for the children that live in poverty and violence, coming to school unwashed, unfed, traumatized by violence that they've seen right close up the night before, children needing psychological assistance, mothering almost from the teachers involved in trying to see that they have clean clothes and food. And I really see it as just such an enormous problem. I really admire people who can try to cope with this, who have not had sufficient funds to deal with problems of this enormity. Has there been any discussion in the work that you've been doing about reorganizing schools in a way that there are certain people who do the kinds of things that teachers might have been doing in the East Side Charter School, that have, for instance, a laundry in the school?
Well, I mean, that's nothing new. I mean, we have 9 Title I elementary schools. That's why we go to uniforms. If we see a young man or young girl come in and their clothes are dirty, we will exchange. We'll take an exchange. But, you know, we really invested this year, well, last couple of years, in social workers, mental health workers, people can deal with trauma. Extremely important, you know, we just changed Shortledge and Warner, we went to a campus model, we took two schools. One's a pre-K to 3, pre-K to 2, the other one's a 3 to 5, and pre-K center there. And,
What is a campus model?
okay, well, they're all both on 18th Street, but they're 4 blocks apart. So they work together as a school, but one school has pre-kindergarten, 4-year-old to 2nd grade. And their entire responsibility is to educate these young men and women, so by the time they leave there, they are reading. So when they get to 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, at the other campus site, same families, same PTAs, same Boys and Girls Club after school, before school, that we see it, we're closing the gap. Our goal is to close the gap, achieve the gap.
So this enables the children to bond, create friendships because.
Very well, instead of having two schools and trying to work on a pre-K to 5 issue, 6th grade, it's pretty enormous, but I can work with all my kindergartners in one building and have all the teachers on the same page of teaching, have the same needs, make sure that we're dealing with the same issues. Example, in 5th grade, when we're working with young men and women preparing them for middle school, instead of 2 schools breaking down the resources to where they're trying to deal with 6th grade, they're dealing with 3 grades. And so we have lower class sizes, we've done it at college as well. We always talk about the Lewis Dual Language School, which 7 years ago the state thought it should be closed, and last year it was listed as the #1 emergency school in the nation.
Question for you.
So that's important. That's important.
But I think he makes a critical point, and he'll talk with the negative sense of early head start, early childhood education, and before that scale for elementary school children. And in early childhood education, I have family service work, and I have mental health consultant. And I've got behavior modification plans for 2 and 3-year-old kids. And that's the extent and the depth of which you have the problem. And, you know, I had a young lady come to me and she had custody of her nephew. She came in, she said, Mr. Street, they put him out of 3 daycares because of his behavior. And I need for you to take him, but this is what happened. Called my sister, she didn't answer the phone. So we went in, broke in the house. She had a massive heart attack, was in the bed, and it passed. He was laying on top of her sleep.
Oh.
And nobody knows how long he'd been there. Well, see, he had an excuse. But my point being, he came in and we had some major episodes, what we call them the health consultants, with the behavior modification program in place, work with him, work with the aunt, and he was 3 at the time. I have him part-time now, Merv has him. He's special needs, but he's not a behavior problem anymore. And he's progressing very, very well, but it took the behavior modification plan, it took the mental health consultants, it took us sitting down as staff and parents to address his special needs, and that's just an example of what needs to be done for some of these children with these major challenges. Now, the harsh reality is, the state doesn't have to spend this money, and they don't have to do anything. But those who call themselves financial gurus, you either pay for it now, or you pay for it later. And it costs a lot less to take care of them now than it does to keep them in prison for the rest of their life.
Christine, Davis has your hand up.
Yeah, I mean, we've got like 6 weeks, essentially 18 days of legislature left. And, I mean, I've read this twice now. I actually was part of it teaching public policy students at the university, and it's a good plan. What I'm interested in knowing is exactly how much money do we need to get out of the legislature, and to the extent that you can share it, are there certain legislatures that we need to be calling to strengthen their position if they're in favor? Do we know who the swing votes are, and do we know who we're never going to get to? I mean, I'm just trying to look at what can we do. This is a good plan. How do we get there?
how do we get it back?
So tomorrow, you probably know this, tomorrow before the Education Committee with House Joint Resolution 12. House Joint Resolution 12 is specific to affirming, the General Assembly affirming the state board's decision in approving the plan. That's all House Joint Resolution 12 does. It doesn't obligate the General Assembly to take any money.
It doesn't subsidize at all.
Not at all, but I'm getting there, right? So that is an important effort for us and has been a bit of an uphill challenge for a couple of reasons. One, suburban red clay legislators, and I won't mention names, but suburban red clay legislators, Democrat or Republican, say they've heard from their constituents about these issues. Now, what I would say is the work I've done over the last 2 years, I'm certain that I've talked to more of their constituents than they have about this issue. And it's about 50-50 in general. But, 10 emails or 10 calls makes a big difference in doing it. So what we tend to do is try to bring as many people, Jay, Merv, some others, to make sure that they know that we have our own constituency too, and we want this done, okay? So tomorrow at 2:30, if you can do it, you should come and make public comment. Second, to your point about cost, in order to do this, we believe that it's going to cost us about $15 million in this first year. Now, you might remember the governor put in $6 million already, right? We are working very aggressively and separately with the Joint Finance Committee around this $15 million. 7.5 of that is specific to red clay. And we've been pretty thoughtful about that. Red clay has voted 4 times, I believe, on the commission's work. Each time they've said, we're in favor of this, but we need 3 things. It be a part of the process, a reasonable timetable, and the money. And we've always said we agree on that. What we've also said, though, is we'd like to phase in, remember I said 50% of all low-income students across the state, across the public school systems across the state are low income. We'd like to phase in some opportunity for additional funding for at least 1 district in Kent and 1 district in Sussex in this initial year. So that's how you get to the $15 million. I'm a little less concerned, to be honest, about the money in this initial year. What I am concerned about is the undertone, and there are 2 undertones. One, if these kids come into red clay, that will bring down the quality of the schools. That's the one thing, right? And the second thing is they do not want to finance that. Right? And what I've said, and you'll see this on the website and in the report, we don't believe that any of this should fall on the backs of the affected school districts. The state has a responsibility. The state is an outlier in the 2 issues that we care about, and they should step up and they should do it now. So that's what I would say on the House side. And then the Senate side is another matter. I would say, so you can dispel some myths. You've heard a lot about redistricting, but most of our plan is about statewide efforts for low-income and English language learners across the state. And our funding is that way. And all they're doing with House Joint Resolution tomorrow, is affirming the state board's decision, which is the provision that is in the law. So they gave the right for the state board to make a decision, and the state board approved our plan. So now we're telling them to affirm that decision.
But he's saying it very positive. And what I'm saying is, you, General Assembly, you created the Neighborhood School Act. You created the Choice School Act. You created the Charter School. Y'all broke it. Y'all need to fix it. Now, at the end of the day, he's talking about $15 million. And I can tell you right now, in the 90s, between Skagnar, Morris James, and Pepper, they spent $15 million just getting free from court supervision.
He's talking about lawyers every
Yeah.
time.
If I could share something.
Jay, you sued somebody along the line?
The only thing before we're done,
They went to court all on their own.
this is an important point. This is an important point. So Jay, normally, when he speaks in public comment, he adds things to the record, right? So there are all these reports that you've heard about, right? What I've told Jay is, if this doesn't pass, what we've been able to give you is an additional 2,000 pages of evidence. If you guys want to take that legal action. So one way or the other, I would like to get this done.
Okay, I'm gonna use my priority as president and ask a question. I was in the Marshall-McCain School District, which was desegregated and why my parents bought the house where they bought it. I was in the Red Clay Consolidated School District, and then I was in I was in the Newcastle County Consolidated School District, and then I was in Red Clay. Growing up, I remember not caring where I went to school, but I did manage to go to 12 schools in 13 years from kindergarten. So, how long, when you do this plan, do you get to stability so the kids and the parents have that?
Well, as soon as we take over, they'll have their schools, they're not moving around.
Okay, that's.
And so the issue is, if you're here, we're following the same rules we have now. You live here, and you wanna go to school here, go to school here. If you wanna go here, you wanna go here. I think you should need to go where you wanna go to school. I think that would make our district, I think, really exciting. But let me just say this, I was considered one of those kids growing up. You know, I was grew up in poverty. And here's the statistic that I want to share with you. If you did nothing else about Red Clay, this is important. We took away all barriers of AP courses. We took away all barriers of taking PSAT and SAT. That means if you want to take an AP course, we offer 53, by the way, according to DOE, but it's only actually 27. Take the course. 5 years ago, I told all of our schools that you had to add 50% of every subgroup of your kids had to be in AP courses. Put them in AP courses, because I think it's important, rigor is important. We've added every year, and our scores keep going up. Statistically, it says when you add more students, your numbers are supposed to drop. We add more students to PSAT every year, our numbers go up. We just looked at our numbers for this year's SAT, we just got it back today, and we grew 8%. We added 130 more kids. You see, it's not those kids. It's people calling those kids that are holding back. It's time for us to clear the path, as I tell every ninth grader. My responsibility is to clear the path and the obstacles so you can see the light at the end of the tunnel. And when kids have a light at the end of the tunnel, it is unbelievable what they get to do.
Marty?
I have one more question, and it's one that has bugged me since the 70s. I actually served on the First Citizens Advisory Council for DeSagan, the old colonial district. So I made the full transition. And I worked on two serious issues, which you started to touch on one. I actually had to go into the Delaware School District and look at buildings with the facilities management people. So I know what hell can be when walls are falling in. I mean, I've been there and done that. The other thing, though, that is atrocious, and I will use Christina again, the middle school, occasionally, I'm not a teacher, but sometimes people with bright kids ask me to tutor their children. I did it occasionally in Colonial when I lived over there, and I do it now in Christina, just volunteer. So the constant problem of textbooks is appalling, and I am sincerely worried about what's going to happen to the children going from Christina into your district, whether they're ever going to see a textbook. There was one little girl who was in grade school, making the transition to middle school, was very bright, very gifted.
Well, we haven't had that problem in Red Clay with textbooks, but the other thing is, we really, we've pushed our one-on-one initiative because we've talked to not a lot of books, some of our books now, especially in our languages are online. And so the issue is, as we continue to push the digital divide issue.
That doesn't mean anything to me. Let me finish asking my question, because I don't know what these programs are. But these children, even the bright ones, if they're having problems in history, and I would say, well, bring me your history book. Teacher won't let us have it. Or they didn't have one. How are they supposed to improve their studying when they couldn't even get a textbook to take home to study from? How are you going to deal with these? Because you're going to inherit the lack of textbooks too.
But we have our own curriculum. And so, as I said before, with 18,000 students, I can't have a parent yet say to me that they don't have a textbook to take home. It's their textbook. And so, what you have to realize is that we're society and we're changing. And with the source of technology, a lot of the materials now, you're not going to see textbooks, you're going to see them online.
No, I understand that.
But
But
I'm
they
trying to
have
answer your
to,
question.
if they don't have access
I
to
can't
that,
help
they
it.
can't get it.
No, that's not, ma'am. This is about technology. when you load the book into the Chromebook, it's in the Chromebook.
I understand.
Okay, but the reality is, Christina has been challenged, with resources because of the inability of leadership to pass a referendum.
Yeah.
And they finally got the referendum passed, and I think that is going to significantly enhance, the learning capability and the resources for the kids in Christina, whether it's city kids stay there or whether or not city kids leave. Passing that referendum is up to the district, but there's been a problem with resources ever since the Wise administration, when $20 million went missing, they had to make that up and then pass referendums on top of it. So it's a different kind of challenge, but I think I'm optimistic it's going to get better with the passage of the last referendum, and quite frankly, I think the new leadership that's only there temporarily has been a major asset to the district.
Jordan, did you have a question?
Yeah, just one, the city of Wilmington has no public high schools as of now. Is there a plan when Red Clay takes over to open some?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, good.
Jordan is a new student for you right now.
She has no textbooks.
I just go to my PS school, and I went to Tower Hill School. I can tell you PS is more beautiful inside
Yes.
than Tower Hill School is.
I love
It's
it.
beautiful. We've done a great job.
I have a feeling it's about, it's been at least an hour, and you guys have a big schedule tomorrow. I appreciate so much your sharing all this with us, and it's really been an informative session for all of us. And one of these days you'll have to explain Chrome to me, but I'm going to
Francis.
Well, the last question is, having been around for a while and worked on DSEG 30 or 40 years ago, my kids went to Brandywine, however, what can we do with the General Assembly? I mean, we all say we have too many school districts in the state, and participated in some downstate, intermediate school districts with 2 people, and up here we have. So what can we do with the General Assembly to begin to resolve some of the problems which will end up with funding equalization?
My answer to that is, I don't know the answer. Because for the 41 years that I've been in the arena, the General Assembly has just frankly not been a good partner. You have folks who will talk the talk, but when it comes time to vote for some kind of progression, for whatever reason, the majority of members of the General Assembly have done that. So I don't know the answer to that. We can keep talking, and a lot of it has to do with leadership, and not to talk to whoever the new governor's going to be.
If there's enough interest in the group, we could put a study committee together and perhaps communicate something to the General Assembly that is a consensus of our feelings about it.
Francis, would you share that?
Sure,
Okay.
because I agree
All right.
with what Jay
Can
and.
you have it ready for tomorrow?
Can't do it for tomorrow.
Okay, but it's one thing, and I think that's a critical point. It's one thing, Jay screaming, hollering, and suing and did it for 40 years, which at some point that gets old because it's the same voice, the same person that it is. But if new players enter the arena, as you're suggesting now, and they hear from folks outside the city who have goodwill toward the city, it can only be helpful.
Okay.
Particularly tomorrow.
And that's our goal.
So
Be helpful.
tomorrow, I mean,
Thank you so much.
we're looking up and down at the.
It'll be 2:30 in the education.
Because I can't make it tomorrow. Will it be up and down, or is there a chance we'll table it?
No, they tabled it last week, we expect them to act.
You expect
Oh.
action?
Oh,
Okay.
gosh.
They hold
Like
the
they said,
schedule
in the
like-
morning.
We expect them to act tomorrow.
Okay.
Email everybody, get the emails going.
House Bill
You all have the,
House Joint Resolution 12, HJR.
you all have the members of the General Assembly's emails, the membership thing I put together, so get on the email tonight.
It's
and
the
look.
education committee.
Target the education committee.
I was there last week, don't get out of.
Tony, when's it scheduled at the house? What time?
Tomorrow, 2:30.
2:30, so it'll probably go out like 3:15.
Wait for a second, and we'll do it like
We're always late.
English, science, math.
Yeah, because this meeting ran long, so.
Okay,
College.
moving on to other business.